Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares with the news from the global economy. Coming up, the forecast remains gloomy for Gazans, and traditional farming makes a comeback in Mali. First, the headlines. Deutsche Bank swung to a net loss in the third quarter after boosting its reserves to cover fines from pending litigations. Germany's largest bank on Wednesday reported a net loss of 94 million euros for the quarter. The loss was expected as the bank booked a higher than anticipated 894 million euros in additional litigation reserves in the quarter. Deutsche, however, also reported a rise in its quarterly pre-tax profit to 266 million euros, boosted by a rebound in the bank's fixed income operations. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff said Brazil's economy would recover in her second term and could avoid a credit rating downgrade. In an interview with the Bandeirantes television network, Rousseff mentioned reforms of Brazil's onerous tax system, but gave no other details of her plans. Rousseff faces the daunting task of regaining investor trust in her management of a stagnant economy, suffering high inflation and dwindling fiscal accounts. Following her re-election on Monday, Brazil's Ibovespa benchmark equity index led global declines, dropping 2.8% as the real sank to a 9-year low.
These ratings agencies have taken this potential downgrade off the table for 2014, leaving it for 2015. I think we are in good condition to recover.
South Korean President Park Geun-hye said on Wednesday the economy was still in crisis and faced the risk of falling into a long-term slump. Park said Korea is at the crossroads between achieving another leap forward or falling into stagnation, underlining that this is the golden time to rebuild the economy. She cited low economic growth, low inflation, and the weak yen as three main risks facing Asia's fourth largest economy and its corporations. She also reiterated her commitment to transforming the economy, currently dominated by big manufacturers, into a more balanced one between manufacturing and service sectors.
We must pursue more balanced growth between domestic and exports, companies and households, and manufacturing and service industries for sustained growth of the economy.
The mayor of Calais said Britain's benefit system serves as a magnet for the illegal immigrants camped in the French port town. Around 2,500 immigrants live in the port, many of them from Africa and the Middle East. As Britain has not abolished controls at its borders with other EU countries, Calais has long been one of the flashpoints in that struggle. In Britain, the latest buildup of illegal immigrants in Calais has fueled anti-European Union sentiment. The UK Independence Party, which wants Britain to pull out of the European Union, is on course to win its second parliamentary seat.
The people who have got through will call and say they've got through this El Dorado. We're here and we're staying here. And because there are no identity papers, so the population is not checked in the same way, so the flows are not checked. And there hasn't been a message from the British government or elsewhere saying that it's not El Dorado here.
The UN General Assembly on Tuesday voted for the 23rd time to condemn the decades-long U.S. economic embargo against Cuba. The voting results were identical to last year's, with 188 countries out of the 193-nation assembly voting to end the embargo. While the General Assembly's vote is non-binding and symbolic, it serves to highlight U.S. isolation regarding Havana. The policy today is mostly influenced by domestic politics in Florida, where Cuban exiles have opposed any conciliation with former President Fidel Castro or current President Raúl Castro, who took over for his brother in 2008.
Today, it seems to me that the United States is losing more with the embargo than even Cuba is. I think Cuba is very able to welcome new investments, new methods of production, and I think for the U.S. it would be an important moment for the economic forces to be able to take part, and I think a number of sectors within the U.S. are already asking for the embargo to end.
The Hamas were heralded as the heroes of the 50-day war against Israel. Little has changed for Gazans who are left without basic necessities. And though the world has committed to paying well beyond the necessary amount to rebuild the Gaza Strip, most of that is aimed at relieving the PA's budget. I-24 News reporter Daniel Roth has more.
Many Palestinians in Gaza have been left without necessities since the summer's violence between Israel and Hamas, as bureaucracy and ambiguity and responsibility have led to slow progress on building. According to the UN, 108,000 are homeless and 18,000 homes were destroyed over the summer. Despite a ceasefire struck in late August and a deal that is supposed to put the Palestinian Authority in charge of rebuilding in Gaza, very little has been done.
When they announced the ceasefire, the residents of Gaza and all Palestinians were optimistic that the 8 years of blockade will end, opening of all the crossings will happen, and the products and the construction of material will get through to Gaza. But after this period of ceasefire, the residents started to feel pessimistic due to the continuation of the siege and due to the mechanics of receiving construction material.
$5.4 billion was assured for rebuilding at an aid conference earlier this month. This is beyond the needed $4 billion physical rebuilding cost, according to Palestinian officials, but only $2.7 billion have been directed toward Gaza efforts, while the rest is aimed at relieving the PA's budget. Indeed, only 75 truckloads of materials for building have come through Israel to Gaza, reportedly representing just 1/5 of the daily volume necessary to be on track for completing repairs in 3 to 5 years. Many are losing hope.
Look, since the morning we became wet from the rain. By God's will, what should we do? It's winter. We can't live inside a tent anymore.
To add fuel to the fire, Reuters reports that the U.S. may cut $500 million in annual funding, and Israel may hold on to $100 million in customs duties that it is supposed to transfer. If the PA goes to the UN Security Council with a bid for full statehood, it could be a major blow to the PA's revenue stream. As well, since Hamas ally, the Muslim Brotherhood, was ousted from their short tenure of power in Egypt over a year ago, Hamas has found itself more embattled in Gaza as economic and humanitarian crises continue.
Joining us now is Dr. Paul Rivlin, a senior fellow at the Moshe Dayan Centre for Middle Eastern and African Studies at Tel Aviv University and visiting professor of economics. Mr. Rivlin, thanks for joining us. So little seems to have changed between Hamas and Fatah and Hamas and Israel. What is the situation with Egypt?
The situation with Egypt has changed with the fall of Morsi from power there. The regime or the government of Sisi, and basically a military regime, is at war with Islamic fundamentalists in Egypt and sees the Hamas as part of that enemy that they're in conflict with.
Okay. I mean, isn't it also true that they've ordered people living near the border to evacuate their homes so there can be a buffer zone?
Right. Well, there's a town, Rafah, that's on both sides of the border. And the problem for security has always been that crossing either over the land or under the land was made easier by the fact that there's a contiguous population. The Egyptians always felt that they had the right for their people to live right up to the border with Palestine, in the same way as they live right up to the border with Israel. But it hasn't worked because they face a major terrorist threat, and they've decided to take pretty drastic action because that action is against Egyptian citizens.
Okay. And, I mean, Washington has made clear lately that depending on how Cairo, does in terms of overhauling the economy, the Egyptian economy, they might be willing to actually have more money streaming into Egypt, the Egyptian economy. Are we seeing a change in the way the financial world views Egypt?
I would say we're not yet. What we're seeing is hope that Egypt can move with the help that it receives from abroad towards a better position, and then when, if you like, the public finances are stronger, the private sector would be willing to go in there and invest. Of course, that also depends on the security situation, which takes us back to the thing we were discussing before.
Of course, right. But Egypt has made some improvements. I mean, Moody has changed its outlook from negative to stable.
Yeah.
Also, we've seen essentially, energy subsidies have been slashed. slashed. Clearly, Finance Minister Hani Kadri has also made clear that there's going to be more austerity. They're going to be pushing more money into the sectors that need it, healthcare, education. What does Egypt's successful execution of all of these plans and reforms depend on?
That, if you pardon the expression, is a $64,000 question. It's one thing to make pronouncements, and there have been an awful lot of pronouncements in Egypt for a very long time. But some things have been done. For example, the energy subsidy cut was overnight and dramatic. It was recommended by all economists and by the IMF and the World Bank. If that is a declaration that is followed by action, it's a good sign. But whether it's possible to go beyond changes like that into reorganizing government, making things more effective, I think is a longer story. And announcements on the one hand and action on the other. I suspect that there's welcome for the intentions, because the intentions could be something completely different. So the intentions are the way the international financial community would like them to go, but whether they can actually make things move is a little bit more complicated. Actually, I'm optimistic somewhat, because I think it's rare for a president in Egypt to take such radical economic decisions, and it's an indication of the fact that he understands the depth of the economic crisis and the implications for Egypt's politics and its international relations if they don't get it right.
Of course, his regime has been able to actually contain the population somewhat. I mean, to avoid any kind of outburst.
If you like, and put this in inverted commas, the economic policy intentions are right from the perspective of the international financial community. The politics, the move towards democracy, which Washington would also like, let's just leave that aside.
Paul Rivlin of the Tel Aviv University Moshe Dayan Centre, thank you very much for joining us. As the nations of the world contemplate global warming, it's back to basics for one-man agricultural revolution in Mali, Oumar Diatabe, who uses traditional farming methods to get the most out of his land. Here's more.
The land here, 30 kilometers from the Malian capital Bamako, is arid and of poor quality. Yet Oumar Diatabe has managed to turn it around and turn a profit by applying agroecology, a natural approach he's been honing for the past decade.
At the beginning, it wasn't easy to show other farmers this. They thought I had something else, another potion, a magic potion that I was using, because the land that I bought here was very poor. Even grass wouldn't grow here.
Oumar doesn't use chemicals on his plot. Instead, he uses compost and manure as natural fertilizers. He rotates his crops to maintain the nutrients in the soil and uses specially selected plants to avoid using insecticides.
La tagette, non seulement il fait attirer les insectes, mais sur les fleurs. Marigolds attract insects to their flowers, destructive insects and others. It means that the tomatoes can grow without being bothered. At the same time, the marigolds produce a nematicidal agent in the ground and so repel parasites that were attacking the roots of the tomato plant.
And his livestock play their part too. He feeds weeds to his cows and recycles their waste as fertilizer. A recipe for success that means Oumar can now deliver his produce to clients across Bamako twice a week.
Now for a quick discussion of other reports we called for you in Media Watch. Hi, Daniel Roth. Thanks for joining us.
How's it going?
Good.
So the Huffington Post has this piece, very important piece in the U.S. The big box store wars have been happening for years. Costco, Walmart, Target. One of the battlefields is whether workers get time off during Thanksgiving. And Costco, a 30-year-old company that pays their workers $11.50 starting salary, is giving their workers time off for Thanksgiving, and they're getting a lot of praise for it. Walmart, on the other hand, minimum wage. Most of their workers don't get benefits. They are making their workers work on Black Friday. Macy's, another big box store, is actually starting Black Friday on Thursday this year at 6 p.m. So you can skip dinner and get right to the shopping.
Let's be honest, 'cause that's what everybody wants to do, right? That's what Thanksgiving is really about, right?
But at the end of the day, Costco is really showing itself to be kind of the calm in the storm, in this kind of retail storm. Costco treating their workers fairly, closing during holidays, kind of, things that you would think were normal a few decades ago are really praiseworthy today.
To be like special, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's good family values.
Yes, big family values for a big box store.
Great. Well, Daniel, thanks for at least uplifting us a little bit there. That's the end of the Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports at i24 News. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Thanks for watching, and join us again tomorrow.